Good evening. I'm Kendall, and I'm in ACA and CODA in Al-Anon.
And hi, I'm Jane. I am a grateful, recovering codependent. Kendall and I are the hosts tonight, and Emily is taking care of our tech support.
We want to welcome you to the Anatomy of the 12-Step Study Group. The purpose of this group is to examine each of the 12 steps in a basic way. This Zoom meeting is not affiliated with nor endorsed by any specific 12-step program. This 12-step study group is not intended as a replacement for having a sponsor or attending other meetings. We know that the 12-step programs may have a different focus as reflected in their version of the 12 steps. However, we believe that regardless of which addiction or problem brought you into the various rooms of recovery, the solution is the same, the 12 steps. We believe that these steps are the core of our program. We don't believe we are finished when we take them once. We believe that they are a tool for everyday living. When we find ourselves disturbed, upset, or find some person or situation unacceptable to us, these steps are one of our first tools, and many times they are the solution to our pain. Before we get started, a few reminders. Any 12-step recovery material is accepted in this meeting. Even though non-12-step information may benefit you personally, we ask that you not share it in this meeting. Please remember to keep your mic muted until you are ready to speak and to minimize background noise when you are speaking. So let's get started. Jane?
Thank you. Tonight we're going to be talking about steps 6 and 7. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. When I came to CODA 4 years ago, I wanted to change. I had attended a silent retreat, and my eyes were open to how my people-pleasing, my compliance, my being exactly what others wanted me to be was dishonest. It created a false illusion, which led to frustration, resentment, and a feeling of entrapment, a feeling of being controlled. Was I entirely ready? I was still walking around in a dense fog. There was much more to understand about the role I was playing in my misery. I was open and willing. After working the 4th step chart and sharing it with my sponsor, the fog was lifted. I was shocked to see clearly how I was selfish, self-centered, inconsiderate of myself and others, and stuck in a victim role. At that point, I was entirely ready to let go of the fears at the core of my deluded thinking. I was ready to let go of my faulty thinking that led to feelings and actions which ultimately hurt myself and others, a damaging force in relationships. Step 7, humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. I'm going to break it down. Humbly ask, let go of my pride, let go of my defensiveness. I am not all-knowing and certainly not all-powerful. I need help in this process. God, the God of my understanding, for me personally, my highest power, all-knowing, all-powerful, merciful, always present and listening. God is love, unconditional, perfect love to me. There are other powers greater than me. Some are good, some are great, and some are pretty bad. I ask God to grant me the wisdom to know the difference, to remove, to take away, to get rid of. The founders and writers of all the 12-step recovery fellowships and materials provide powerful tools to assist in this transformation, this renewal of my mind. My sponsor is a powerful resource, a person with more experience and more attuned to seeing what was at the root of my obsessive thinking, my anxious thoughts, my irritation with people, my wounded emotions. She assisted me with shifting my thoughts to a healthier place, which brought peace and confidence during this process of transformation, this reprogramming of my brain. Fellow travelers speaking at meetings brought and continue to bring additional insights, helping me to get rid of my unhealthy thinking. This removal of shortcomings was and is a process that takes time, practice, patience with myself and others. The first time I worked step 6 and 7, after working 4 and 5 with my sponsor, using the chart that we're using in this group, I found a big rock in the middle of a river. Sitting on the rock, contemplating the character flaws that had been revealed during step 4, I wrote them on pieces of paper, burned them, and watched the ashes float down the river. I looked for a little pocket stone to keep as a reminder of this turning point in my life. The rock represents to me the beginning of a transformation of my thought patterns, a shift in perspective. The rock is solid, representing courage and faith, replacing my fears. The rock sparkles in the light, representing joy of the moment, love and acceptance, replacing criticism of myself and others, and representing beauty and gratitude. I also took pictures of the river and have one of them framed in my house. The river represents going with the flow of life, trusting God, accepting people as they are instead of resisting the current and living in fear of what might happen. Listening and watching the river, the water flow over and around the rocks with ease and grace inspires me. My goal is to allow God's perfect love and acceptance to flow in and through me to reach out and touch others. Thank you for this opportunity for me to share my experience.
Thank you, Jane. And now I'm going to talk about my experience with step 6 and 7. So last week, a new resentment was bubbling up. Go figure. The world was crazy and it was not okay. My sponsor asked, so Kendall, when has the world not been crazy? I conceded the roots of chaos and character defects have been in place since the dawn of man. My sponsor then said, and you're trying to figure out the world now because step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Per the Big Red Book of ACA, it states, quote, our defects of character include self-centeredness, judgmentalism, envy, greed, lust, jealousy, feeling superior, dishonesty, and pettiness. But what if I'm not entirely ready and I don't want to, as in my case? Per AA's 12 and 12 quote, how many of us have this degree of readiness? In an absolute sense, practically nobody has it. The best we can do with all the honesty that we can summon is to try to have it. No, I can't give this up yet. No, this I will never give up. The moment we say no, never, our minds close. My mind was fractured with anger and fears. The spiritual war was within and needed to be addressed spiritually through my higher power. I tried to bypass him, of course, searching for that easier, softer way of blaming them and shaming myself. True, they had done some reprehensible things, but I was the one unhappy, depressed, and distancing myself from friends as all I talked about was what they did. My sponsor likened it to me wanting to change snakes into bunny rabbits or make dogs meow. Both scenarios absurd. I could not see my own character flaws. My defiance stood in the way of peace. My lack of acceptance negated serenity. Through steps 4 and 5, I recognized I shared the same character defects as everyone on my resentment list. It was selfish of me to want to change them because they had free will just as I did. They could exercise that free will as they saw fit, not as I saw fit. If only I would see them and accept them as hurting, sick humans. Per the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, page 422, it says, quote, "There is a little bit of good in the worst of us and a little bit of there's a little bit of good in the worst of us and a little bit of bad in the best of us." And per ACA's Big Red Book, the truth is that I am a good and loving person who has some flaws. My brother died 2 years ago at age 60 from rage masquerading as a heart attack. After years in recovery, never getting past step 3, I did not want the same demise. Yet, surrender still seemed impossible. Truly, it was impossible because I was trying to do it by myself as God Jr. I was at a crossroads. Choose God's healing power as I'm beginning to understand and reimagine God, or let my resentments spiral. I could be bitter or better, but I couldn't be both at the same time. Simply stated, rejection or acceptance. With prayer, persistence, a new compassionate seasoned sponsor, and all the tools of recovery, I finally became entirely ready to surrender the character defects stifling my recovery progress. Why not really give a higher power a chance? Step 7 states, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. What's next? Pause, pray, and act. I asked God to take away my character defects in all their forms, my self-centeredness, my selfish motives, my dishonesty with myself and others, my inconsideration to myself and others. I wrote out 50 character defects. Yes, 50. I snipped them into little pieces of paper and placed them in a marble mortar. I struck a match to them, my gesture of letting go and letting God. It was a relief and release. I could finally put God Jr. on a shelf. Although I'd written 50 character dysfunctions, I could have just written one word, F-E-A-R, and that would have sufficed. I could have added, I'm tired of being afraid. God, please take this away from me. Results for me have not been a whoosh, but have been welcome ripples. I started driving differently. The daughter of a former New York cabbie, niece of a NASCAR winning race car driver, as well as a native New Yorker, asserting that I was an aggressive driver might be an understatement. Now, if someone's in a rush, I let them have the right of way. If someone's driving slowly, I envision they might be keeping me from a traffic ticket or an accident. Traveling on the interstate, I was recently cut off. My brother yelled out excitedly in consternation. My response was, "It's okay, Thomas, we're fine. They're in a bigger hurry than we are and they weren't paying attention." He sharply looked at me like, as if I were a pod. "What have you done with my sister?" We had a great rest of the day with no stress and no reference to those scary moments. If I'm running late, I realize that speeding will only shave minutes off my journey, and it's no one else's fault that I didn't allow enough time. So seemingly unwittingly, after completing steps 6 and 7, began the release of the character defects of speeding, procrastination, tardiness, anger, being easily offended, and impatience. Now I enjoy driving. I have found my excursions less stressed, and I'm noticing the scenery and appreciating the privilege. At times, I am surprised that I'm acquiring a curious compassion towards myself and others, and accepting that I'm not God, I'm not a genius, I'm not an alchemist, and I'm glad I'm not a pod. I can let go and not be a victim anymore, discarding the capital V on the front of my forehead. It is freedom to realize that through steps 6 and 7, that it is perfectly all right for me to accept that I am perfectly imperfect. Thanks for letting me share. And now we will turn the floor over to Vernell.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vernell, recovering codependent, and ACA, and so much more. I'm glad to be here with you. Okay, I'm going to read something that those people I've sponsored and others that I've talked to may have heard me talk to them about before, but I'll give you a little background on it. I think this was originally taken from an AA talk by a lady called Sandy B, and it was done in June of 1976 in Palm Desert, California. And she was talking on Drop the Rock. There's even a book by the same name. So then I found this little gem called Stepping Stones to Recovery from Codependency. And I'm going to read you this lovely little story that I think drives home the point. Drop the Rock. Seems there was this group of 12-step members taking a boat ride to this island called Serenity, and they were truly a happy bunch of people. As the boat pulled away from the dock, a few on board noticed Mary running down the street, trying to catch up with the boat. One said, "Darn, she's missed the boat." Another said, "Maybe not. Come on, Mary. Jump in the water, swim, swim. You can make it. You can catch up with us." So Mary jumped into the water and started to swim for all she was worth. She swam for quite a while and then started to sink. The members on board, now all aware that Mary was struggling, shouted, "Come on, Mary, don't give up. Drop the rock." With that encouragement, Mary started swimming again, only to start sinking again shortly after. She was going under when she heard all those voices shouting to her, "Mary, drop the rock, let go and drop the rock." Mary was vaguely aware of something around her neck, but she couldn't quite figure out what it was. Once more, she gathered her strength and started swimming. She was doing quite well, even gaining a little on the boat. But then she felt this heaviness pulling her under again. She saw all those people on the boat holding out their hands and hollering for her to keep swimming and shouting, "Don't be an idiot, Mary, drop the rock." Then she understood when she was going down for the third time. This thing around her neck, this was why she kept sinking when she really wanted to catch the boat. This thing was the rock. They were all shouting about resentments, fear, dishonesty, self-pity, intolerance, and anger, just some of the things her rock was made of. "Get rid of the rock," she told herself. "Now, get rid of it." So Mary managed to stay afloat long enough to untangle a few of the strings holding the rock around her neck, realizing as she did that her load was easing up. And then with another burst of energy, she let go. She tore the other strings off and dropped the rock. Once free of the rock, she was amazed how easy it was to swim, and she soon caught up with the boat. Those on board were cheering for her and applauding and telling her how great she was and how it was so good having her with them again. And how now we can get on with our boat ride and have a nice time. Mary felt great and was about to indulge in a little rest and relaxation when she glanced back to shore. There, a ways back, she thought she saw something bobbing in the water. So she pointed it out to the others. Sure enough, someone was trying to catch the boat, swimming for dear life, but not making much headway. In fact, it looked like they were going under. Mary looked around and saw the concern on the faces of the other members. She was the first to lean over the rails and shout, "Hey, friend, drop the rock." Thank you for letting me share. I generally This is the first time I haven't cried. I generally cry. I don't know what it is about this story. It just hits at my heart like all the junk that holds us down. So thank you for letting me read it to you.
Thank you, Brunel. We would like to open the floor to anyone who'd like to share their experience with steps 6 and 7. We will leave time at the close of the meeting for questions. Please be mindful of our no crosstalk guidelines. Since we have a large group, please limit your shares to 3 minutes and serve as your own timekeeper. Raise your digital hand, or if calling from a landline, send an email message to the anatomy of the 12 steps 22@gmail.com, and we will try to get you into the discussion. Pat.
All right, can you hear me okay now? Good. My name is Pat. I guess I should do that first. My name is Pat, and I am an adult child of an alcoholic. I'm a codependent, member of ACA and CODA, as well as Al-Anon. I live in Danville, Virginia. For me, when I got to 6 and 7, I went into a lot of fear. Because my thought was, okay, if I'm supposed to turn these character defects over to God, now what do? I don't know the answers. I don't know how to live life. When I first came into the program, I was probably more agnostic, and over time, I would never tell anybody this. Because a lot of people shut their doors when they hear this. But over time, I decided that I was not agnostic, that I really was more atheist. But I am such a big believer that it doesn't matter what your belief is. 12 steps work. I always felt like, okay, if step 6 is ready to have God remove all these defects of character, and step 7 is humbly ask Him to move them. I always felt like I was getting a magic wand, and somebody was going to bone me on the head and say, okay, now you know how to do life. I came into these rooms through the doors of Al-Anon, and I've tried to find it while we were starting this meeting up. There's something in Al-Anon about don't pray for something because God's going to send you a lot of the same stuff so you can practice. I'm not getting that right. Maybe somebody else will remember it. But for me, it was really more of a letting go of the judgment of the past and letting go of being so angry at me because I wasn't as good a person as I thought I should be. Now for me, the way I look at it is that I don't have to have fear after I do steps 4 and 5 and look at all you guys to help me learn how to approach some of these difficult situations that life throws at me. Life gives me an opportunity to practice a new way of being, a new way of approaching, my new way of approaching my fear of how the world's going to fall apart. I mean, we talked about this morning on a meeting. But steps help. Once I do 1 through 5 and 6, including those, start seeing kind of like I can start seeing flaws in the way I'm thinking. Not that I'm a bad person. All help teach. So it's that I was an innocent child that was raised by two people that didn't know any. They were probably adult children. I mean, when I found out that my father's mother committed suicide, we didn't know that until, gosh, 40s, I think. I can't remember. But, you know, there was so many families. There was a lot of pain in that. No wonder when life wasn't going the way he wanted, he became an alcoholic. No wonder mother became so. They didn't have the tools to see how to be on my.
Pat, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're kind of losing, we're sort of losing you on some of the, we're dropping you on some of the, sentences.
Okay.
Yeah.
The earpiece out and see it. I'm trying something better to hear me better now.
That works,
No.
that works, thanks.
Well, I was pretty much done, so sorry about that. I have a picture on beside my desk of me when I was 3 years old. I'm acting like a monkey, and I put it up there because that's my job now. My job is to teach me, help me learn how to deal with conflict, how to deal with fears, how to deal with crappy people that are difficult to deal with, how to deal with crappy situations. That's my job now. And I know now that when those situations pop up and I don't know how to deal with it, I can call you guys. You guys help. So thanks for letting me share. I'll put myself back on mute.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you, Pat.
And someone else like to share on step 6 and 7? Catherine?
Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine. Thank you so much, Jane and Kendall and Emily and Vernell. Some of the questions that were posed in the homework, I'd like to just focus on one. What is humiliation versus humility? Humiliation to me is like shame. I am a recovering codependent. I'm an adult child of an alcoholic. I know what shame feels like, and humiliation is very similar. You know, it can be a memory, it can be a hateful act, it can be a mean, you know, attack. It can be a lot of things that will bring up something about yourself, and you feel a little bit of a victim. And humbleness, in contrast, is that you feel equality. I feel equality when I feel humble. I don't feel superior to anyone or inferior to anyone. I don't feel superior because I've been in program longer than someone else, or that maybe I have been more involved in, you know, the workings of an organization. We're all recovering at the rate that we are recovering at. And I accept that. And with humbleness, I accept that. I admire people that have wisdom. I take from these meetings. It doesn't matter if it's your first day. You say something I can use, I'll steal it. You know, if you have a saying that I like, I'll write it down. So humbleness is a quality that is very important. It's the opposite of arrogance. It will help with doing the 12 steps. Understanding that you're not the center stage, you're not, the world does not revolve around you. Being willing to accept maybe that there's some changes that need to take place, and I had to go through that in these steps. Understanding that to get my life right with me, I had to make some changes. And so that was a very humbling experience. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Catherine. And next we have Nancy.
My name's Nancy. I am Al-Anon codependent, live in Indiana. 6 and 7 for me, it was not an instant relief like a lot of people talk about. 6 and 7 for me was more gradual. It was more like, humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. I asked God to remove a shortcoming, and I ended up with a lesson on that shortcoming. I think the thing that somebody else was trying to think of from Al-Anon is, there's a sentence in Al-Anon that says, if you're praying to God to remove your toothache, you better be on the way to the dentist. And what it means is that, what it means to me is that I have to do the footwork to remove those character defects. I can ask God to remove them and become ready for God to remove them. And part of that becoming ready is doing the footwork, the actual whatever it takes to get rid of that shortcoming. So it's been a gradual process, but when I look back now, I can see where 6 and 7 are in my life, and when I've done 4th steps more recently, like within the past, I'd say 10 years, I can 6 and 7 is more, it happens more quickly than it used to. Mostly because I don't let resentments get as bad as as solidified inside me as they used to. So I think 6 and 7 are steps that can easily get overlooked because there's not really any one thing that you do, it's different for everybody, so it can easily be overlooked. But it's really important not to overlook 6 and 7 because it's the relief after doing 4 and 5. 6 and 7 are like the relief after admitting to these shortcomings and no longer being in denial about them and being honest. Then 6 and 7 is like the relief after that. They're very important. And there was something else I was going to say, but I can't remember it, so I'm going to stop. That's all.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And next we have Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy, ACA AA from Arkansas. One of the things on these questions is, what does humbleness mean to me? And I read something this week, and I don't know where it was from, but it said gratitude is, that's your mama, talk to her. Gratitude is the basic ingredient of humility. And humility is the basic ingredient of anonymity. And then it said, I am alive, I am sober, and I'm a member of AA. So I guess it was AA stuff. But I'd never heard that gratitude was the basic ingredient of humility. But if I'm grateful, it's really hard for me not to be humble. Because when I'm grateful, I'm looking at things in a realistic way, and like I'm looking for something to be grateful for. So I thought that was good, and I just wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Next we have Vernell.
Hey, everybody. I looked over some of the notes from last year's 6 and 7. And there were some really good things that I had found, and I did some research on it. Step 6 and 7 go hand in hand, right? As we know, we turn to our higher power or a power greater than ourselves to relinquish our will over to the faith we have nurtured so far. And so step 6, we have to become entirely ready and to be able to let go and not have fear. Any fear again comes up. And then I had looked this up last year on what Bill Wilson, the key idea of step 7 is humility, as we've been hearing. And many of us in recovery misunderstand humility. As codependents or para-alcoholics, we may think humility is doing for others and placing ourselves second. By the time we work step 7, we should have a new and hopefully honest understanding of ourselves, and seeing our shortcomings made us realize that we cannot change ourselves without some type of divine help. And this is what Bill Wilson said when referring to step 7. True humility is seeing ourselves as we really are, to have a reasonable perspective of oneself. He expanded this definition when he wrote, humility is clear recognition of what and who we really are, followed by a sincere attempt to be what we can be. And I think that says a lot. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Vernell. And next is Abby.
Hi, everybody. I'm Abby. I'm a recovering codependent and an adult child. And this has been another fabulous session. Thank you to all the presenters, and the great shares really have just been flying at me. And I'm really just kind of echoing some of the things that I've heard, but I too agree that 6 and 7 can easily get overlooked. After 4 and 5, I wanted to coast for a minute. You know, I wanted to take my feet off the pedals for a second. And, you know, I was aware of what my defense characteristics were, my shortcomings. So of course, when I'm aware of something, I want to continue in recovery. And to me, 6 and 7 is really realizing that I am recovering, and I have to practice it. I have to say, these are my normal go-tos in my personality. I have to practice being the better person that I know I can be. And willingness is just, will I or won't I? You know, it's really all these steps that you have to be willing to accept this or willing to let go of that. If you're not willing, you won't. So thank you very much for letting me share.
Thank you, Abby, for sharing. And next is Hortensia.
Hi, good evening. My name is Hortensia. I'm an ACA. I'm gonna share one of the questions from step 6 and one from step 7. The one I really loved was, how do I become entirely ready? So I wrote, as a consequence of going through step 4 and 5 and being conscientious of how my defects of character are creating so much pain in my life and my relationships. It's like saying, I'm aware of my part in this. And if I'm aware of how I'm contributing to this situation, are you ready to make a change? And from step 7, the one I like was number 3, the obstacles that stand in the way of asking my higher power to remove my shortcomings. For me, it's my sense of entitlement to feeling that they owe me an apology. I'm the victim here. My victim role, my lack of humility, or just a lack of complete awareness, not working my steps, or stepping out of my program. When I stop going to meetings, that tends to go away. So I have to keep checking in and not abandon my program. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you so much, Hortensia. Appreciate your share. And next is Ellen.
Hi, So I don't know if you can hear me, but I really enjoyed doing the 6 and 7. So I did it twice, and one time I did it like one format, and the another time I did a different format. But both times I went to the beach and like I wrote all the shortcomings and I threw it in the ocean, and it felt really liberating, and it was just really wonderful. I think to just let go and. But to see that on paper, all the shortcomings, and like again to understand that that's kind of what is it's happening to me, and also my sponsor made me write all the positive things too, like next to the shortcomings. So I wrote all the shortcomings, but also wrote all the positive things. Because sometimes it's just like really depressing, right? To like look at all stuff that you're bad at. So that I thought that was really good. So a second time I did that with all the positive traits, and I thought it was really great. So yeah, but you just see that on paper, and then to try to like ask God to remove all that, it just like humbly remove. And it was great to just do that. So just wanted to share that there's like the positive traits too, and that was really nice. Not just to focus on the negative, but also know what's good about me too. So yeah, thanks for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Oops. Anyone else want to share on any of the homework questions that have been shared? The process of coming to believe in terms of asking God to remove our shortcomings, stumbling blocks I know for me, I just wasn't ready for years and years. So, but let's turn the floor over to Jane and then Vernell.
Hi, I'm still Jane. And one thing I read that I found to be interesting when I was researching step 6 and 7 was the reason why Bill W. added step 6 and 7 to the steps. And it was because, well, recovery, the principles of recovery began with the Oxford groups, which he found in using those principles or in teaching those principles that many times alcoholics relapsed. And so he felt that there needed to be more power, and that is why he added step 6 and 7 as to empower people in their recovery. And for me, I think of, and I know I said this in my presentation, but first of all, you know, obviously I need to reach a point of being entirely ready. Now, it doesn't mean necessarily I'm entirely ready to let go of everything all at once, but I have to come to a place with whatever shortcoming or flawed, diluted thinking has been revealed to me. At that point, I need to be ready to let go of it. But when I let go of it, I'm empty. Now, empty of that. Well, it's not as simple as that. Like someone else said, there's no magic wand. You know, I have self-will, and these are deeply rooted patterns of thinking and behaving and fears, deeply rooted fears for me. So I desperately want to let go of it, but it's easier said than done. So it's simple, but it's not easy. And this is where, for me, 12-step recovery, the meetings, you know, having a sponsor were really, really powerful tools for me to have a strategy to replace my fear with courage or faith, or so for me, it really was a process. And I certainly found that the more meetings I attended, the more open I was to try different tools. And I went through a period of time where it's like, who am I? I mean, if I let go of all this, who am I? I just felt really odd. And, but as I really put into practice the tools, you know, this transformation took place. Thank you so much for letting me share.
Thank you, Jane, for sharing. And next we have Vernell.
Okay, Madeline, do you want to go? Because I've already shared a couple times. I'll let you go.
Doesn't matter, but I can go ahead and go. Thanks, Vernell, and thanks, you guys. This is great. I've been thinking the whole time about how I felt when I did my 6th and 7th step. And it was sheer relief. Because what I was doing is I was letting go of my wrongs, you know, my character defects, or the way I've heard it said lately, I really like, is my character defenses. Because my selfishness came about because I wanted my family to do it my way, to be the kind of loving, supportive family that I thought I needed as a child. My wrong was also not realizing as an adult that my mom and my dad could not have done it any better. They had no clue about how to parent me and probably my brother and my sister. They had never taken a course in parenting. They'd never read a book in parenting. There was no television programs in parenting because there was no television back then. They had no idea how to parent. And why would I blame them for not being the kind of person that they weren't, that I wanted them to be, when they had no way of knowing how to be that kind of parent? So it was my selfishness I had to give up, and my being inconsiderate of where they were or where they weren't, that I had to give up. I also gave up fear because I was afraid that they never would be the kind of parent I wanted them to be. And of course they wouldn't. They couldn't. They don't know how. So that fear I had to give up as well. And then I had to give up my dishonesty or my delusion into thinking that they could have done it any differently, and they couldn't. So when I did my 6th and 7th step, it was a huge relief off of me. I felt it, and I felt it for weeks. Now, as a sponsor, the second thing I want to share is, as a sponsor, I usually have people I'm working with to do a physical step in this case, to get ready in 6 and to actually do something physical in 7, not just to think it through of letting go their wrongs, but somehow to do something physical. And I thought I would share a couple of those with you. I had one lady who was very religious, so she decided to give her wrongs to God. She was working full time, so she got a key to her church, and she went over to the church on Saturday to do her step 6 and 7. She sat in the pews and wrote out her wrongs on pieces of paper. And then she folded all those little pieces of paper and then took them up in step 7 to the altar and gave her wrongs written on that paper to her God at that altar. And the key part of that story is, she told me later, the next day was Sunday, and she went to church as usual and realized that all her little pieces of paper were still up there on that altar. And she thought, well, that's okay. She's already given them to God, you know, and that doesn't matter. They can stay right there. And she didn't panic. So it was kind of great. I've had other people do things like write their wrongs out on big rocks or a piece of wood. Some have burned their wrongs, writing it out on paper. One lady wrote her wrongs on paper, folded them up, and put them into each leaf of a pine cone. So she had pine cones stuck with little pieces of paper. And then she burned all of her pine cones to get rid of her wrongs. I had another lady that brought helium balloons to the house and did hers by attaching her wrongs to the balloons and let them go. And she said she felt better with that one. I've had one lady who lived near a creek, and so she wrote all of her wrongs on this humongous rock and threw it in her creek and watched it sink to the bottom of her creek. She says now when things get kind of rough, she goes out to her creek and she looks down in the creek, and there still is her rock at the bottom of the creek. And she said it just somehow makes her feel better that it's gone, it's there. And I had one other lady, and I'll close with this one, but she wrote all of hers out, wadded them up on a piece of paper, wadded them all up, and then burnt them. And then she collected all of those ashes and put them in a small jar, and then put that jar on her mantle in her house to remind her of her wrongs that she had burned up and given up, and they're gone. And she said it was amazing. She had a huge stack of paper that she burned, and it came down to just a teeny tiny bit of ashes. And she said it always reminded her that she made mountains out of molehills. So I just think it's great. And I'll close with one other tiny piece. There's a lot of God talk in 12-step material, including in step 6 and 7. And being an atheist, I had no God to give my wrongs to. So what in essence I did is I simply let them go. And I think the end result is the same, whether you have a God to give them to or whether you just let them go. But the relief was great. And I wanted to carry that sense of relief that I'm not responsible for what other people think or do. And I can love them now because I'm free of all of my wrongs and all of my character defenses. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Madeline. And next is Renelle, and then Barbara.
Guys, hi everybody. It's me again. So in 2013, a group of 7 ladies worked through Melanie Beatty's guide to the 12 steps for CODA. And when we got to this step, there were several of us that, as has just been mentioned by others in here, that were just so afraid, like, what am I going to have left? What is there going to be if all of these are gone? So we all came up with an idea, and we got poker chips like this, and we wrote our defenses on one side, and then we wrote assets on the other side, because that way, when the shortcoming was gone, we still had that positive part of us. And that it really was helpful. Everybody seemed to really feel better about it. But in reality, I wasn't really afraid of that for me. Then I did these steps with a sponsor, and it was different. But what I found out was that it didn't happen, as has been said, automatically. It was not an overnight sensation. I read a lot on it when I got home, and I read lots of perspectives, and it was a slow turning. But what I came to learn is that my higher power, God, only takes away the defects as I'm ready, and when my higher power is ready and knows I'm ready, and that only the defects that are standing in my way, the rocks around my neck, as I read, that are getting in my way of being my true, authentic self, the person that my higher power wants me to be. Thank you for letting me share.
Thanks, Renelle. Barbara?
Hi, this is Barbara. I am grateful, recovering adult child, and I'm just so grateful to be here, and thank you for all of your shares. I've done some work on step 6 and 7. The step 6 I remember when I first read this stuff or heard it read, I took issue with the term defect, because coming into, and I started out in Al-Anon, and when I first came into the program, I felt defective already as a result. I think in so much of it was as a result of growing up in very dysfunctional and scary home or environment and culture. And so to say that I had, that I had defects within me was just challenging. And so, as I continued to attend meetings and listen for other synonyms or words that means the same as that term, shortcomings kind of set better with me, or a flaw in my character. And then of course, I had to look up the word character, because I had not thought a lot about what that word meant. And it had to do, what I determined that, it had to do with my morals and my values, not someone else's, but mine. And so, after doing some work on step 4, of course, some of my flaws, the flaws in my character showed up very clearly, and there was a pattern of some of them. But when I came to step 6 and 7, I too had took issue with God removing all of them. I just did not think that God would actually remove all of the flaws in my character. And what I found, a lot of times, was that when I asked God to remove a certain flaw, I would be presented with an experience or something. For example, one of mine was, because I was so full of fear when I came into Al-Anon as well as ACA, one of mine was dishonesty. And I would be dishonest sometimes because I was afraid. And it was just as easy to tell the truth, but because I was afraid of what someone may think or what might happen, I would be dishonest. And then I would be faced with a certain situation, okay? And it was like, my mind was, okay, you've asked God to remove it. Now you have an opportunity to be honest about this situation. And it was so interesting how sometimes I would make the choice to be honest. But then I sometimes would make the choice to be dishonest. And then I would find myself, if I was dishonest with someone, going back to make it right. And I got tired of doing that. It didn't make me feel good inside. So I'm going, okay, higher power, I really would like for you to remove that one, because I don't want to continue to have to keep going back and saying, okay, I lied, because I was afraid, or whatever the reason might have been. So for me too, though, that it was definitely a process. And every time I stand up for what my values are and my morals are, I really have a sense of wholeness and completeness within myself. But when I don't, do that, I notice that I feel, and I'm not sure, sometimes I have a hard time finding the right words, but I don't like it. I'll just put it that way. And I'm learning that I have to live with myself, and I have to take myself wherever I go. And so I have to learn to let go and allow God to remove the flaws within my character. And I know so many of them have been. And it's been an interesting journey because I realized how much more courage I have today than I had when I first entered this program. And I really, I'm just really, really, really grateful for the changes that have occurred in my life. And one of the questions was, do I fear change? And I wrote down, there have been many instances in my life when I was very afraid of change because I didn't know what to expect. And my mind would just be going in all, just going just out of control about, and creating a lot of different scenarios. So it kept me, a lot of times, it kept me at times frozen or in a situation. I stayed in a situation that might have been unhealthy or unsafe because I just wasn't ready to face the changes that I would have had to face. But today I have a different perspective about change. And I always say there's one thing that's constant about life, and that is change. Things are always changing. My body, my mind, things in the world, other people. And so afraid today of change. I see it as a part of my journey. And for the most part, it can be, if I can stay open, the changes in my life that they're not so bad. It has so much to do with how I choose to look at the changes. And I'm trying to learn to look at things from a positive perspective, and not to fight against change, because I realize that for me it doesn't hurt anybody but me. And I am about trying to live my life as open and as honest as I can. And I'm grateful that that step 6 and 7 is a part of this this wonderful of this 12-step recovery program, because again, for me, it just helps me to accept myself and live more peacefully with who I am. And I'm just learning a lot, just listening from you all to you all as well. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with that.
Thank you, Barbara, for sharing. Next is Ellen, and then Catherine.
Hi, I'm Ellen. I'm an adult child alcoholic codependent. I live in California. So when I was doing my 4th and 5th step, my sponsor requested that I bring a way to release my step 6 and 7 and release everything physically, because it has more power to it by releasing it physically. So I thought about it when I was in therapy, and there was this woman that was in the group, and we were on an intense weekend, and she shared some really powerful, painful stuff. And when we got done with that session, she was outside throwing rocks like as hard as she could, all her power behind her, into the ocean, to the ocean. And by the end of the weekend, she looked so peaceful and joyful. And I saw her about a year later, and she was doing really, really good. So I thought, well, throwing rocks into the river or something would be a really good way to do that. So when I got done with my 5th step in that, I went and I found this place along the river. It was a boat launch area. There didn't seem to be anybody around. So I went and I had collected rocks and I wrote stuff down. It's really difficult to write on a rock, but I wrote the best I could. And then I said my prayer to release, and I threw everything like as hard as I could, one by one, threw in there and yelled the top of my lungs of what I was throwing into the river to release it and letting it go. God, take it. And when I got done, by the time I got done, it was raining. And I didn't have a raincoat, umbrella, or anything, but it just felt really good. And when I got done, I looked around and there was actually somebody there fishing on a dock like always. And it's like, oh, I don't care. But when I walked away, the thought that came to mind was Sandra Bullock in the movie 28 Days. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but near the end, she asked for help, and she helped me, and she was working with this horse, and she was able to get the horse's leg to come up. And when she got done, she walked away and she was hugging herself and the look on her face. So when I got done, I felt relieved, and that's what I did. You know, I did this, and then that thought came to mind about the end of that movie and how peaceful and just free. It just felt so good when I walked away. So I thank my sponsor for that. And when I got home, I was exhausted, and I had the best night's sleep ever when I got home. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ellen. And next is Catherine.
Hi, Catherine, ACA and codependent. I went to a CODA retreat out in Arizona. It was wonderful, the world event, and we made boxes, and we had all kinds of things from magazines and whatever. We had like cigar boxes, and it was our God box. And I picked this box that actually looked like how I would picture God to look. Was some Spanish guy, but you know, put words and sayings and things like that. I came home and I just felt so much relief from all the workshops that I've been through out there. And I had a problem with one of my nieces, and it was just so out of my hands that I just wrote her name down and put her in the box. And it lifted like some real pain and anxiety from me. So I started doing that with things that I could not control, people I could not control, I could not change. I knew that some of these things were just out of my hands. And so that was a relief. And then later I started connecting with my higher power and loosening up my concept of God and what God is. But I do feel a presence, and it's very comforting. But you know, in step 6, it is willingness. It is willingness that we have to have. And it doesn't say that we have to complete it. It just says that we have to be open and willing to do that step. And there's a page on 211 in the Big Red Book, and it says the fruit of our character defects, which is kind of a nice spin, right? And then the branches of the laundry list and how they kind of intertwine like a tree. And, you know, so it's intermixed, the laundry list, along with like para-alcoholics are codependent. So along with some codependent things, but it's, you know, it's quite a challenge when you look at it. There's a lot to get over, there's a lot to get past. But then when you move into 7 and you find humility, I think that's when you really connect with everyone else. When you can find that commonality in the program. And I find that as I change, that miraculously the people around me that are not in program, that have no mindset for this program, change also. I'm being treated differently when I change my mindset. So 6 and 7 is maybe not the big splash that 4 and 5 is, but it's a very quiet, steady drizzle of recovery for me. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Catherine, for sharing. And next is Ellen.
Hi, I just want to share really quickly. So I think when I did the 6 and 7, one other thing that came out was the fear and like realizing, I guess, why I was a people pleaser. And then I was afraid to lose the love of my parents and I guess my dysfunctional family. I guess I'm coming clean more. Anyway, but that was the fear of losing that conditional love. And then after realizing that is actually conditional love. And actually it's not a real love. So I have no fear. I should not be afraid of losing that, or, you know, and therefore I don't need to be a people pleaser. And that was a really, really hard realization to actually for change. And I'm still struggling with that, obviously, but just to see that pattern and to see that that was the reason for my people pleasing behavior. In how fear is connected to that, I think that it was really, really great to see that. So I just want to, I guess, thank for the sponsor for that thought process, because I was like, how does that relate one to another? And I'm just really grateful for that. So that's what I realized, is that where people pleasing was them, like just the reason was that because of the fear of losing their loves. But thank God I went through it, and now I'm just working one step at a time to not be a people pleaser. So thanks for letting me share. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Ellen. I did want to share again that a couple of weeks ago, I did a fears inventory with my sponsor, and looking at, you know, just like we went early through the chart earlier, what those fears were. Well, we went through steps 1, 2, and 3. You know, 1, I am powerless over people and my life is unmanageable. 2, come to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand God. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory. 5, admitted to God, to myself, and to another human being the exact nature of my wrongs. So 4 was doing the chart that we had, and I was doing a fears inventory. And it started with just, you know, like one fear, but I was like, nah, it doesn't completely cover it. But as I lifted them all out, I was reminded that it still is actually one fear that's just branched out into so many different, twigs in my life. But in doing the step 4 and then step 5, you know, I had a conversation with God. I was encouraged to look in the mirror and have a conversation with myself. And then I admitted and went over all of these fears and what the cost was in terms of me not having serenity, and what the payoff was for holding on to these fears and resentments. So then step 6 and 7 came up again. And the first time I went through that 2.5 years ago, I was encouraged to take step 6 and 7 within 24 hours to do an action step with those 6 and 7. So that's when I did the mortar and pestle thing and lit those bad boys up in the mortar. That was really fun, actually. But then when this came up a couple of weeks ago, that first night that I worked with my sponsor, my grand sponsor, I felt better that first night. And the second night, I felt okay. But by the third night, those fears and anxieties were coming back again. So I spoke with my sponsor this Saturday about it, and she said that's why it's a 1 day at a time program, Kendall. We're never fully free. We always have to be kind of in flux working on this. And of course, I didn't want to. So she had me pull out my charts again, write it up where I was again, go through them again. Can you see where you're not taking responsibility for this, Kendall? No. Can you see where you're being selfish? No. Can you see where you're being self-centered and inconsiderate? No. Now she goes, okay, well, you figure it out and you call me back. I did not want to call her back. So I just had to surrender. And she was right. And we worked through it. And again, I was able to find some peace. But since then, every day since then, I have been taking a piece of paper. And the first time I just grabbed a piece of loose leaf paper and wrote FEAR, and put a big X through it. And I live 2 blocks away from a river, the mighty Dan River in Danville, Virginia. It's really not that mighty, but there is a pedestrian bridge that goes across it. And I went across that pedestrian bridge and I balled that thing up as tiny as I could get, and I threw it down into the river. And it really did. It felt good all over again, just like, you know, that first time. But every day, that was Friday, I think, but every day I've been doing that, including today. Went back to the river, different bridge, balled that paper up. My little brother was with me, but he wasn't aware of what I was doing. He was enjoying the scenery and the birds, which was cool. And I threw it into the river, and it's just a release, just to be free of it. And today I wrote fear, and then underneath that I wrote guilt, I wrote shame. I said, thank you, God, take this away from me. And then I wrote X's through all of it except the thank you part, and balled it up and threw it in the river. So getting more in touch with step 6 and 7 through this process of realizing this is an everyday thing. It's not a one-time thing. And I really have to work on it. And I avoid it. And the more I avoid it, the more I'm in anxious and depressed mode and fear mode. And what if this and what if that and the future. And I'm tired of living like that. I really am. So when I do these steps, I feel so much better. So now I've got to do an 8. I don't know if I'm going to do a letter to myself again, or if I know you need to do an amends to someone else, and then 10, just work on it every day. But thanks for letting me double dip.
Thank you so much, Kendall, and thank you everyone for all your shares. We're about out of time. Please feel free to share the concepts you heard tonight, but not who was here, so that we protect the anonymity of each person in the group. We ask you to please take what you need and leave the rest. Some of us will remain in the Zoom room after we close for those of you who may have questions. And before we close, let's hear from Abby about next week's homework on step 8.
Hi, everybody. Again, I'm Abby, a recovering codependent and an adult child. And for the next 2 weeks, Catherine, Ellen, and I will be of service for steps 8 and 9. Step 8 is made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And step 9 made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So our homework this week, which Ava gratefully sends out for us, will give you some questions to ponder as you assess your willingness to make these amends, and a handout entitled Step 8, The Keys, addressing forgiveness and self-forgiveness. And lastly, a chart for your amends candidates. So we'll see you next week to discuss your discoveries. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. We're going to close with the CODA's 7th step prayer. In this moment, I ask my higher power to remove all of my shortcomings, relieving me of the burden of my past. In this moment, I place my hand in God's, trusting that the void I experience is being filled with my higher power's unconditional love for me and those in my life. Thank you for the opportunity for us to be of service. We appreciate each one of you and your openness and willingness to share your experience with step 6 and 7. Now that we've concluded the meeting, we're open for any questions or comments.